The area where I spent my childhood wasn't the most pleasant. Its residents were mainly there due to financial constraints rather than a preference for the neighborhood. Many houses were notably small and aged, and the local businesses struggled to remain operational for extended periods, often closing within a year or two. During my youth, it was a common occurrence for us to explore abandoned houses and businesses. Despite the widespread engagement in such activities by every kid in town, the police seemed aware but took no action. When I was quite young, my elementary school closed down, and the building was left untouched. As I grew older and ventured into these deserted locations, I became curious about the current state of the school. One Saturday night, my friend Ryan and I, lacking cars, embarked on a 4-mile walk from his house to reach the school. The school building had always struck me as somewhat eerie, even when it was still in use. Situated on the town's outskirts, nestled in the woods behind a chain-link fence, it hardly resembled a typical elementary school setting. Undeterred, we climbed over the fence and approached the building's wall, searching for a broken window through which we could enter, and fortunately, most of the windows were already shattered. I took the plunge, entering the abandoned school ahead of Ryan. Our initial instinct was to stand still and listen, gauging if anyone else was present. The building emitted loud, hollow, creaking sounds, creating an eerie ambience, but it appeared deserted. As we proceeded down the corridor, peering into various rooms, the experience of revisiting the school after numerous years left us with a surreal sensation. While silently exploring, we passed 3 rooms until a sudden, muffled thud resonated through the building. We halted, exchanging glances, but the silence that followed suggested it might have been the structure settling. Ryan reassured me, attributing it to the building's weight, and we resumed our exploration down the corridor. Many rooms were either empty or filled with a jumble of chairs, lacking any intriguing discoveries. However, the atmosphere shifted when we reached the rear corridor of the school. Chairs were strewn about, obstructing our path, requiring us to move them aside to access the rooms. The first room proved locked, so we proceeded to the second room on the left. Peering inside, we were greeted by an unusual sight, what appeared to be clothes hanging from the ceiling. Intrigued, I entered the room, puzzled by the presence of such an odd arrangement. A fleeting thought crossed my mind, questioning why Ryan remained silent, prompting me to wonder if he had seen what I was seeing. I pivoted around, scanning the room, and my eyes landed on a figure at the back. My gaze fixed on the far wall, revealing a disheveled man staring at us, holding something in his hand. Compounding the unsettling scene, he was scarcely clad. I shot a quick glance at Ryan, who also locked eyes with the man, prompting him to urgently seize my arm and pull me back into the hallway. In an instant, a metallic object clattered across the room towards the door we had just exited, accompanied by a bone-chilling scream. Reacting swiftly, we sprinted down the corridor, leaped through the first open window, and ran until our breaths faltered. It wasn't until we were safely distant that we pieced together the situation, realizing that the man likely wielded a knife, which he had seemingly attempted to throw at us. Considering his unstable state, the realization dawned that he posed a significant threat. If we had lingered or failed to notice him, our escape might not have been possible. During my adolescent years, roughly between 14 and 16, my friends and I had a penchant for seeking refuge away from our homes. Our preferred spots usually involved hanging out at fast food joints, taking it easy, or discovering secluded places in the woods near a park. It was a phase where we craved solitude, desiring to escape the constant scrutiny and presence of others looking over our shoulders. The challenge challenge we encountered during our late-night weekend excursions was that most shops and restaurants closed long before we were ready to call it a night. This issue became particularly evident during a winter vacation. Even when we opted for parks as our hangout spots, we discovered that other groups had the same idea, making it less enjoyable. One night, our friend JT suggested exploring his parents' old farmhouse, assuring us that no one else would be there. Although he had mentioned it a few times before, we hadn't seriously considered it until that particular night. JT drove me and my friend Paul to what seemed like the middle of nowhere, stopping at a wooden fence. The fence was chained, marking it as private property, and lacking a key. JT parked and leaped over it. However, from the fence's edge, I noticed something unsettling. I couldn't discern the farmhouse's outline. Despite the darkness and absence of light, the structure remained indiscernible in every direction. Undeterred, JT led us down an uneven gravel path, narrating the reasons behind his parents' acquisition of the property. He shared with me that the farmhouse originally belonged to his grandparents, who bequeathed it to his parents upon their passing. At the time of inheritance, the property was in a deplorable state, and unsure of what to do with it, his parents simply retained ownership. Nearly a decade had elapsed since then, during which no maintenance or oversight had occurred. Following JT along the path for about 10 minutes, we finally discerned the house's outline in the darkness. Its dilapidated condition became evident as part of the roof appeared to be sinking inward, resembling an impending collapse, and some siding panels dangled precariously from the wood. Silence enveloped us as we approached, observing the deteriorating structure. Upon reaching the front, we found the entrance covered by a large sheet of wood, prompting us to circle around to the back, where the door was entirely absent. Equipping our phone flashlights, we ventured inside. Contrary to our expectations, the interior was surprisingly intact. Most of the furniture and belongings seemed undisturbed, though the pervasive dust and suboptimal phone lighting might have masked the true extent of its condition. After a moment, we dispersed, exploring the ground floor and examining our surroundings. Entering the left side hallway of the house, I began descending the stairs when, unexpectedly, a figure passed by the end of the hallway. Startled, I called out to JT, half hoping it was him, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Despite the dim lighting, the man I glimpsed was taller and leaner than my friends. Stepping back, I retraced my steps to where I had last seen them. Turning the corner and grabbing a lantern, I found JT and Paul standing in the room, facing away from me. As I entered and followed their gaze, directed by the lantern's light, the man stood at the edge, looking directly at them. A palpable fear seemed to freeze them all in place, unsure of how to handle the situation. "Guys, let's just leave," I uttered in a trembling voice, attempting to convey calmness to prevent any escalation. However, this seemed to trigger a collective reaction, and we hastily rushed to the back door, bolting into the open field. While I can't confirm whether the man was chasing us, JT insisted he heard footsteps right behind him. We swiftly returned to the car, leaving without taking any further chances. In retrospect, we speculated that the man might have been a squatter or a homeless person, defending the place he considered home. Unfortunately, we never got a good look at him to confirm our assumptions. Certainty is elusive in this situation. JT had initially mentioned informing his parents to secure the farmhouse, but apprehensions about potential repercussions prevented him from following through. The events of that night remain etched as my most chilling experience. If JT's suspicion about the man's pursuit holds true, we consider ourselves exceptionally fortunate to have escaped unscathed. Just a year ago, after a prolonged hiatus, I felt a strong yearning for a hiking adventure. Having longed for the solitude of the trails, I seized the opportunity when I had some time off from work. The nearby mountains, a 2-hour drive away, beckoned with numerous trails. Despite scrolling through countless photos, I opted to make a spontaneous decision upon arrival. My primary focus wasn't on the specific trail. Rather, I envisioned spending most of my time unwinding by the tent. Equipped with a 4-day supply of hiking gear and provisions, I embarked on the journey to the mountain. Not widely frequented, this lesser-known peak offered limited parking spaces due to its lack of popularity. Eventually, I located a dirt lot on the roadside and parked there. After stepping out of my vehicle, I walked along the road until I reached one of the camping trails depicted on a rather gray map. The trail extended for several miles through the woods and up a mountain, branching into 3 different paths leading to camping spots. Deciding this would suffice, I commenced the hike, reaching the 3 trails in just under 2 hours. Without discernible differences, I chose the leftmost path. After approximately 30 minutes, I arrived at the campsite, an open area with fewer trees. Desolate and untouched for an extended period, the site was so overgrown that without a direct path, it could easily blend into any other part of the forest. I tossed my bags under one of the trees, set up my tent, and then settled on a log to enjoy my lunch. Following that, I lingered, writing in my journal and immersing myself in the birdsong. As the sun began to set, I realized the need for a fire to stay warm. I stood up and explored the perimeter of the campsite, gathering sticks, but ensuring not to venture too far from my tent. I stumbled upon something peculiar, an unusually clear path leading into the forest. It wasn't your typical trail. Rather, it bore the signs of frequent use, as if someone had traversed the same route repeatedly. Normally, such paths tend to become overgrown if not regularly used, making the clarity of this one surprising. Despite having gathered sticks and started preparing a fire, an uneasiness about this trail prompted me to investigate before setting up camp for the night. I slung my bag over my shoulder and ventured along the narrow trail. The more I traversed it, the stronger the impression grew that someone had been there recently. After a 15-minute walk, I reached the trail's end. In the woods, just beyond the path, stood a small, decaying hut. The wood was deteriorating, some boards were missing, and the door stood wide open. As I approached, I pondered why a well-trodden path led to an abandoned hut in the woods, seemingly too remote for casual discovery. Driven by curiosity, I peered through the open doorway. The interior was dark, obscuring most details, but it was evident the space was not empty. There were objects inside. On the verge of taking a step forward, a sudden voice from behind jolted me. "Go away! Go away!" The man's stern and almost angry tone compelled me to maintain a distance of about 10 feet. Repeatedly commanding me to leave, he left no room for negotiation. Without uttering a word, I complied and started walking away. Glancing back once, I observed the man standing at the end of the path, ensuring my departure. Upon returning to my tent, darkness had already descended, yet I harbored no intention of staying. Swiftly packing my belongings, I departed cautiously, navigating through the pitch-black surroundings with a flashlight until I reached my car. The unsettling encounter left me frightened, as I was certain the man I encountered didn't reside there. Clad in normal, clean attire and displaying no signs of long-term habitation, he raised perplexing questions about his presence and the origins of the trail. The mystery surrounding the situation leaves me with countless unanswered questions, making it unlikely that I'll ever unravel the truth.